Hi, my name is Maya. I'm an independent college counselor, and in this video, I'm going to be talking about what it takes to get into UCLA or UC Berkeley, the two most selective UC schools. So I was talking to a parent recently who was understandably frustrated that they had kept hearing, mostly from me, that UCLA and UC Berkeley were far-reach schools for their child, when they had friends and family members who had gotten into those schools, apparently without very impressive resumes. Now, comparisons like this are always a little tricky for me because I have no idea what's on your friend's older brother's cousin's application, and honestly, probably you and your parents don't either. It might seem like they're not doing any extracurriculars, but they could just be doing something that they don't talk much about, like maybe they're secretly building sentient robots in their bedroom. But that aside, it's pretty reasonable to want to know what specifically it takes to get into the most competitive UCs. Now that the UCs are test blind, it's harder to just look at the stats and have a sense of whether you could get into any given UC. So in this video, I'm going to look at 4 case studies for actual students that I worked with in the last 2 years to see what made the difference between those students who got into UCLA and UC Berkeley and those that did not and got into other UCs. Just to be clear, I've anonymized the data a little bit to protect the identities of these students. While these profiles are based on real students, I've generalized and made some little changes so that they're a bit more generic. Of course, this is not representative of every applicant. These are all relatively privileged students coming from relatively affluent areas of California who had a lot of opportunities available to them. And that's just because that's the demographic that tends to hire college counselors. But the UCs really emphasize that they look at students in the context of their high school and their lives outside of school. So if what I just described doesn't really describe your background, you might be competitive for UCLA or UC Berkeley with a profile that's slightly different from the ones I'm about to describe. So let's start with 2 profiles of students who were admitted to UCLA and UC Berkeley in the last 2 years. So let's start by looking at the profile for student number 1, who was admitted to UCLA and UC Berkeley, as well as a number of other UCs. This student had straight A's in all of their classes. They were identified as UC ELC, which means that they were in the top 9% of their graduating class at the end of junior year. They had taken 5 APs already going into senior year, and then were planning on taking 6 APs during senior year. They had 6 AP scores going into senior year, all 4s and 5s, actually mostly 5s. They had self-studied for 1 test, so that's why they had 6 AP scores, but only 5 AP classes. They had also taken 3 community college classes and gotten A's, so those are college level classes. The summer before senior year, they did 2 summer programs. One was a competitive summer research program, and one was a 2-week class for college credit. They also had a summer job. And then for their extracurriculars, they had 4 years of participation and a leadership position in a nonprofit organization. So that showed a lot of dedication to that single organization. They had done 4 years of a varsity sport. They had played an advanced musical instrument for 4 years, and for 2 years were in a competitive orchestra. They helped with a family business throughout high school. And then they had 3 additional extracurriculars related to school or volunteering, and a leadership role or founder in 3 of those. I said 3+ because they were also in like some other clubs, but didn't have very high participation or a leadership position in those additional extracurriculars. And now let's look at the profile for student number 2, who was also admitted to both UCLA and UC Berkeley, as well as a number of other UCs. This student also had straight A's in all their classes. They were identified as UC ELC. They had taken 4 APs going into senior year and were planning on taking 4 APs during senior year. They had 3 AP scores going into senior year, and they had 3s and 4s on those. They had participated in academic research for 2 years and were co-author on 2 published academic papers. They had 4 years of participation and leadership positions in 2 different school clubs that competed regionally. They had organized a significant fundraising event for a nonprofit where they had volunteered regularly for about 2 to 3 years. They had 4 years of a varsity sport, including a leadership position. They had summer jobs before sophomore, junior, and senior year. And then they had over 6 additional extracurriculars related to school or volunteering, including leadership roles. I felt like if I gave more detail on those, it would start to give away a little bit too much personal info about the student, so I left those extracurriculars a little bit general. So both of these students are exceptionally strong, both academically and in their extracurriculars. Student number 1 has a little bit more of an academic advantage, but student number 2 has a bit more leadership, and both of them are just really exceptional students. Now I'm going to look at 2 students who were denied at UCLA and UC Berkeley, though they were admitted to other UCs. So student number 3 was denied at UCLA and UC Berkeley, but they were admitted to other competitive UCs. So let's take a look at their profile. They had mostly A's, but some B's. They had taken 3 APs going into senior year and were planning on taking 4 APs during senior year. They had 4 AP scores going into senior year with an average score of 4, and they had self-studied for one of those tests. They had taken 1 community college class and gotten an A. Before sophomore year, they did a summer program that was a 3-week class for college credit. They had 3 years of participation and a leadership role in 2 different clubs that competed regionally and on state levels, and they had won regional and state awards. They had co-founded and had leadership roles in 2 additional clubs. They had done a summer job before senior year. They had 2 years of consistent volunteering at 2 different community service organizations, and then they had over 5 additional extracurriculars related to school or volunteering. And now let's look at student number 4, who was denied at UCLA and UC Berkeley, but was accepted to other competitive UCs. This student had straight A's. They had taken 4 APs prior to senior year and were planning on taking 4 APs during senior year. They had 4 AP scores going into senior year with an average score of 4. They had taken 2 community college classes and gotten A's. They had created a small business. They had participated in a junior varsity sport for 4 years. They played an instrument at an advanced level. They had 3 years of consistent volunteering with the same organization, and they had over 5 additional extracurriculars, including clubs, volunteering, and pursuing personal interests and hobbies. So let's sum up all this data for a more direct comparison so we can get a better idea of what exactly makes the difference between a student who gets into UCLA and UC Berkeley and a student that doesn't. The students in Group A who were accepted to UCLA and UC Berkeley had straight A's in all their classes. They had 8 or more AP classes total. Their AP scores had an average of 4. They had 2 to 3 really standout extracurriculars like academic research or really strong leadership, and then they had 6 or more additional extracurriculars that still showed sustained commitment or leadership. The students in Group B who were denied at UCLA and UC Berkeley but accepted to other highly competitive UCs had mostly A's, maybe all A's, or maybe some B's. They had 7 to 8 AP classes total. They had a mix of passing AP scores, 3s and 4s, and they had 8 or more consistent extracurriculars with some leadership. So what are the takeaways here? What are the differences between Group A and Group B, which both consist of strong students? I would say that students who are accepted to UCLA and UC Berkeley generally have flawless transcripts and have maxed out the AP opportunities at their school, and that they exhibit more leadership accomplishments and or advanced skills like research in their extracurriculars. I also want to note that there are a lot of factors I'm not discussing here. The major you apply to at a given UC can make a big difference. Some high schools have more AP classes available than others. So this is not a template for getting in, but more to show you what a successful versus unsuccessful application to UCLA or UC Berkeley might look like. One thing that I really wanted to point out before ending this video that I think is really important is that the students in Group 2, the ones that did not get into UCLA and UC Berkeley, are still really good students. They're not like getting C's and playing video games all day. They're working really hard. In my experience, the Group 2 students are working just as hard as the Group 1 students. Often the application will have some really great strengths like straight A's or some really cool extracurriculars. Maybe not at the same time, but that's why they're going to get into other UCs. But I know from my own experience talking to students, from talking to other counselors, from reading articles, from watching TikToks, that a lot of students are just really confused about how they can be good students and still be denied admission at these UCs. I just hope that after watching this video, some of you can go into the admissions process with more realistic expectations and then use that to help you build a stronger college list to make sure that you will have options in the spring. Thank you so much for watching. As always, feel free to leave any questions in the comments and make sure to subscribe for future videos on the college admissions process.